If you really think about it, everything is dependent on Dylan and Bethany's word. Hey everyone, it's Lucky with Unfiltered Lucky. And today I want to talk a little bit about Dylan and Bethany. Now, I'm not trying to accuse Dylan and Bethany of anything, but I do want to talk about the idea that Dylan and Bethany basically control the narrative. They basically tell the story of what happened in the Idaho 4 crimes. Now, we know that Dylan and Bethany were there. Dylan and Bethany have said that they were there. And law enforcement tells us that Dylan and Bethany were inside this house when these crimes occurred. Out of the 6 people inside the King Road house that night, Dylan and Bethany were the only 2 who were left alive. So Dylan and Bethany are the only 2 people who know what happened that night. Well, other than the person or people who committed these crimes. But Dylan and Bethany, they knew where everyone was in the house and at what time. Bethany told law enforcement that she had seen Ethan and Xana at the fraternity party from 9 p.m. until 1:45 a.m. Now, Xana's dad, he stated that he spoke to Xana at midnight that night, and Ethan and Xana were at home eating pizza and watching movies. Now, law enforcement chose to go with Bethany's statement that Ethan and Xana were at the fraternity party from 9 until 1:45, and we never heard about Xana's dad talking to Xana at midnight that night ever again. Now, Bethany would obviously know better because she was at that fraternity party from 9 until 1:45 a.m., right? Now, it was reported by police that Bethany and Dylan were out in the community that night before they went home. There was no real specifics about where they were that night. But then we find out that Bethany was apparently with Ethan and Xana at the Sigma Chi fraternity party from 9 p.m. until 1:45 a.m. So Bethany must have been with Ethan and Xana at the fraternity party, which is weird because weeks after these crimes, law enforcement was asking the public for help in determining where Ethan and Xana were from 9 p.m. to 1:45 a.m. that night. Now, they would have already questioned Bethany because this was weeks after these crimes occurred. So they would have already talked to Bethany. And it seems as though Bethany would have already told them that she was with Ethan and Xana at the fraternity party from 9 until 1:45. So why was law enforcement looking for Xana during these times if they had already talked to Bethany, and she would have confirmed that? I would also think that Bethany was with Ethan and Xana if she is claiming that they were there from 9 p.m. to 1:45. She claims that she saw them there. So, unless she was with them, how would she know where they were during those times? Now, something else that is kind of strange is that in the PCA, it mentions that Bethany returned home just after 1 o'clock. So how would Bethany know that Ethan and Xana were at the Sigma Chi house until 1:45? So weeks after these crimes occurred, And after they had already questioned Bethany, law enforcement is still asking about the whereabouts of Ethan and Xana between the times of 9 p.m. and 1:45 a.m. But Bethany's statement clears all that up. They just happened to be at the Sigma Chi party for that whole time. So Bethany, she was able to kind of clear up that confusion and account for Ethan and Xana during that block of time. Something else that's kind of strange about Dylan and Bethany is that in the very beginning, Dylan and Bethany were reportedly on the ground floor. We had 2 roommates in the basement, and it was widely reported. We all heard it in the very beginning. Dylan and Bethany were on the ground floor. Now, at some point, Dylan moves up to the 2nd level, where she's able to get a look at the assailant and also document a time for the timeline. So it worked out pretty well that Dylan moved up to the 2nd level. Also, let's not forget that Dylan stated in the PCA that she originally went to bed in her room on the 2nd level. Originally, as in the beginning or at first. But where did Dylan end up if she originally went to bed on the 2nd level? Only Dylan and Bethany would know that because they were the only 2 people alive in this house. So Bethany is on the very 1st floor, and Dylan is now on the 2nd floor. Now, apparently they're both trying to sleep. So how do either one of them even know that each other is there? Oh, that's right, because Dylan and Bethany were texting each other. So they knew what each other were doing. Was Dylan maybe messaging Bethany to ask her if she was hearing the same noises? Is it possible that Dylan was messaging Bethany because she wasn't sure what to do? Should she flee the house, or should she stay locked in her bedroom? Did they flee the house? Nobody would know that because Dylan and Bethany were there when law enforcement arrived. So the only people who would know what was going on in this house are the people who were there before law enforcement arrived. So we really only pick up at the point where law enforcement arrives. Dylan and Bethany, and whoever was in the house as well, are the only people who know exactly what happened before law enforcement arrived. They could tell any story that they want, because they were the only people left alive in this house. Only they know why law enforcement was not contacted until almost noon. Now, I'm not exactly sure about where Ethan's body was found. There's been a lot of different reports about where Ethan's body was found. But it's reported that Ethan's best friend came to the house that morning and found Ethan and Xana in Xana's bed. He also states that he checked Ethan's pulse, and then he yelled to Dylan and Bethany to call 911. Ethan's best friend ends up using Dylan's phone to call 911. So Dylan and Bethany didn't even discover the bodies of their roommates. Ethan's best friend discovered their bodies. So what are Dylan and Bethany doing all of this time? We know that there was some cleaning going on because of the latent footprint that was found in front of Dylan's bedroom door. That had also apparently been cleaned up. But what were Dylan and Bethany doing during all of this time? They could have been doing anything. Now, when questioned by law enforcement, Dylan says that she saw the assailant. She got a good look at the assailant and saw that he had bushy eyebrows. She kind of gives a very generic description. He was clad in black, which that's a strange thing to say anyway. But he was clad in black, 5'10" or taller, and he had bushy eyebrows. He wasn't muscular, but kind of athletic. He wasn't heavy, but kind of skinny. It was a very generic description that Dylan gives law enforcement. And then law enforcement takes that description and runs with it. So it was very convenient that Dylan was on that second floor to be able to see this assailant. Now, after she sees the suspect, she goes into a frozen shock and eventually closes her door and goes back to bed. Now, Dylan also stated that she believed that when she saw the assailant, that he could have just been, a party goer that was in the house, that just happened to be leaving the house that night. And that's why she didn't call 911, because she thought this was just somebody leaving the house from a little get-together that they were having. But that doesn't make sense, because why would she have gone into a frozen shock phase if she thought that this was just somebody leaving the house that was a guest of one of her roommates? So there's some conflicting information there from Dylan. Dylan's very vague description became a big part of the PCA. Now, that can't be confirmed that Dylan really did see this person, because only Dylan was there. It's also reported that Bethany apparently saw some naked guy, which also can't be confirmed because nobody else would have seen that other than Bethany. So anything that Dylan and Bethany are saying cannot be confirmed because they were the only two people there. And they were separated by floors, Bethany being on the first floor and Dylan being on the second floor. So they can't even confirm each other's stories. So nobody can confirm their story because they were the only two who were there. And they can't even confirm each other's story. So basically, the who, the when, and the why are completely up to whatever Bethany and Dylan say that it is. Think about that. Something else that's mind-blowing is that Bethany and Dylan don't want to testify. They don't want to talk to the court. That's crazy to me. They were the only two people left alive in this house where 4 of their roommates lost their lives. They're the only two people who know what happened inside that house that night. And they just don't even want to talk about it. They're not interested in talking about it. They were the only people other than the suspect who was inside this house when these crimes occurred. These are your star witnesses. They were in the house. And they don't really want to talk to the court. It just doesn't make sense to me at all. These people were in the house when the crimes occurred. It just doesn't make sense. Please stay tuned for my next video, And please like and subscribe to my channel if you like my content. I really do appreciate it. We'll see you next time.